Daniel here from JCAD Pictures, and this is evaluation question 7. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about the camera work. In our preliminary task, we use creative camera shots, but as you can see, we don't have the best camera work, with a few of our shots being shaky, and some of our movement is very jumpy and static sort of, due to not being comfortable with using a DSLR camera and not understanding how a little shake will affect your final outcome of the shot. But when it comes to our final film opening, we made sure our shots were more steady for starters and didn't throw in too many shot variation like we did in our preliminary, which made it look very sporadic and too convoluted, which puts the audience off. For one, it makes it very, very hard to follow, and secondly, it just, as I've said before, looks very convoluted and makes it not easy on the eye. Also, something we learned to do is to take multiple takes of each shot, so we have multiple options in case one shot is too dark, someone gets their thumb over the lens somehow, stuff like that. Then we used editing. This links with camera work, so the editing we use in our preliminary task compared to our final film. In our preliminary task, we aimed to use continuity editing, which we did, but we left too much time in between certain shots. For instance, the shot of him leaving the building to the outside, because it's in a completely different area. We used medium and fast-paced editing for our whole preliminary to have high tension throughout, but we learned from our audience research that they want a break-up of pace so they don't get too much action and be sort of burnt out. That's why we used the jump cut to a flashback in our final film to break this up. In our final film, we used cuts that flowed well so the audience didn't notice the editing. Well, we hope so. The location for our preliminary task, we didn't put any thought into our location, so therefore we ended up filming it in our school, which meant that it didn't look like a place that fits a thriller film, and we had time constraints on how long we could film because we didn't plan ahead and the school had to close. Which, compared to the location of our final film, was planned weeks in advance, so we could make sure all of our group was available, our actors were available, and we could have the adequate amount of time to film. Then the location for our final film looked more gloomy and less inhabited, with the forest scenes meaning that it looks more thin compared to an occupied school. Obviously, the flashback scene was meant to look occupied. Now, the setting of our preliminary task was never actually thought of, and therefore there wasn't one. But in our final film, we learned that because of our audience research and research into setting, that setting is essential in a thriller film, and that's why we decided to set our thriller film in Slovakia, because of obviously in our audience research mentioned in a previous question. So the storyline in our preliminary, we didn't really have a story. We just decided to make it up as we went along and chose the shots we found interesting to do, and then we'll add this to a story somehow. This meant that there wasn't a fluency to the whole thing, apart from the talking scene at the beginning, whereas with our final film, we did research into typical storylines and wanted to conform to the conventions. So made a storyline synopsis blog post for the research, and then we also made a storyboard so we know what shots go in what order, what edits we wanted to use, and the storyline, so we made sure it all flowed fluently together and looked well done. The costume in our preliminary task, we had costume which didn't fit in the thriller film genre. We had the protagonist wearing a colourful shirt which looks too friendly compared to what, he was meant to be a menacing character, a bit like the anti-hero, and it just looked too friendly basically. But in our final film, we made sure that costumes fitted the character and what we wanted them to convey. So we had the protagonist Jason wearing casual wear so he could be relatable to the audience. Then in the flashback scene, he's wearing a suit that connotes that he's a businessman and has good wealth and intelligence. Then the antagonist, or the mysterious biker, we had him wearing a helmet to make the audience uneasy when seeing him, and to, of course, keep his identity secret. And then finally, with the character Katie, we had her wear a nice presentable dress to make sure that it gives off the right connotation of her being a business lady. The titles in our preliminary task, we made our titles in Premiere Pro, and therefore they look basic and not that professional. Especially our final title, which looked bland and just popped up compared to in our final film when they faded in nicely. And our final title saying Sprint had an effect on it of rain and snow, which made it look more appealing. And finally, we used After Effects for our final film, which made them flow better, actually work over the text, like they moved and stuff, they cut in better, and they just look more professional. The sound we used. In our preliminary task, we had diegetic dialogue, which was very frustrating to listen to due to it being loud in one shot and quiet in another. So in our final film, we worked on having a consistent and clear sound level for the diegetic dialogue, which we achieved. Then also there was background ambient sound in our preliminary task, and that was like children shouting and stuff in the background because we filmed it at school. And this just also added to the struggle of hearing it, and didn't really make sense with it. Like, why would there be children in the background? Someone's getting murdered, obviously. So then in our final film, we worked to eliminate this background sound because it really hinders the experience of the film and takes you out of it. Now, the non-diegetic sound in our preliminary was fitting, which was a positive, but looped, which sounded very strange, really, that it looped back. And then it had a lot of bass drop, like it drop at points where there wasn't anything for it to drop out on screen. Whereas in our final film, we used an actual score we made, so it fit to our film perfectly, and it dropped where it needed to, and this where it needed to. And lastly, the props. The prop we used of the phone in both of them stay consistent because it's a phone something everyone has and it's relevant in today's society, and therefore we wanted to use it. But then the weapon we used a metal pole we found in our preliminary, which we didn't put much thought into the weapon. We just found the metal pole. We thought we're going to use that, so it doesn't look menacing. It doesn't look like it could kill the protagonist or anything like that. Then in our final film, we used the prop of a gun, which looks a lot more intimidating. You actually think a gun could kill someone compared to a small, flimsy metal bar. So basically, we learned that you need to use appropriate props for what you're trying to achieve in your film.